Hello, wizards, witches, and everyone in between. My name is Emma, and welcome to today's video. So today's video has been a while in the making because I wanted to have a certain amount of books read in order to make this. And in this video, I wanted to share my thoughts on Stephen King, his books, the theory I have about his books, and then as well as give you a rundown on the books of his that I've read, how I would rank them within each other, how I would classify them as like scary or not, all that kind of stuff, all of my thoughts on Stephen King. So as of currently filming this video, I have read 13 Stephen King books, which I think he would be my most read author now at this point, which is crazy. So out of these 13 books, 10 of them have been read within the last year, and 9 of them have been read within the last 3 months. First of all, I just wanted to give a brief rundown on the ones that I have read. So Misery, Carrie, and The Shining are the 3 books of his that I read like years ago. And up until this last year, like I said, these were the only 3 books of his that I'd ever read. I believe the first book I read was Carrie. And it's a little bit of a funny story about this. I commuted for my undergraduate degree. I got there one day and it was like a day where I had a class in the morning and then a huge gap and then a class like late afternoon. So I got there and my class was canceled. So I had so many hours to fill and I did not bring a book or anything because I wasn't expecting class to be canceled. So I went to our tiny little like school bookstore, and this was one of the few books they had that interested me. Obviously mass market paperback, I'm not a huge fan of them, but you know, when you're bored, anything is fine. And I read Carrie, and I gave Carrie 3 stars on Goodreads. This was back in the day though. I'm not sure if I reread it like this year, if I would feel any differently about it. I do think it was a solid, like, quick, fast-paced thriller. I think the best way to summarize this is honestly just to read you the back, because I'm scared I'm gonna give something away if I try and summarize it myself. So, Carrie may be picked on by her classmates, but she has a gift. She can move things with her mind. Doors lock, candles fall. This is her power and her problem. Then, an act of kindness as spontaneous as the vicious taunts of her classmates offers Carrie a chance to be normal until an unexpected cruelty turns her gift into a weapon of horror and destruction that no one will ever forget. So that's Carrie. So then I believe I read The Shining. After reading Carrie, I had seen The Shining before all of this, the movie, but after reading Carrie, I was like, I should read something else by Stephen King, so this is the next thing I went to. And back in the day, I gave The Shining a 4 star. I remember this being very, very slow. Like, the first half was painfully slow, and then the second half was really good. And so I was glad in the end that I read it. So I think you guys all know about this. It's about like the Torrance family, and the dad gets this job to be the caretaker of the Overlook Hotel, and he gets kind of possessed by the bad spirits in the hotel. Classic. Definitely glad I've read it, but it definitely was not like my favorite. Then I read Misery by Stephen King, I'm guessing within the same year, like 2014. This is definitely my favorite out of the 3 that I've just mentioned. I gave this a 4 star, and this follows a writer who gets in a car wreck and he's rescued by this lady who's like his biggest fan named Annie. And Annie brings him back to her house and takes care of him and basically kidnaps him and doesn't let him leave her house. So he's trapped in this lady's house trying to find a way out. It was very suspenseful, kind of slow paced, so beware of that, but I still really loved it, and the premise is just so good. The movie is also a very, very good adaptation of this, in my opinion. Alright, so now we're at books that I have more recently read. So I'm not going to get very in-depth into this because of that. I have talked about them recently in my wrap-ups, so I will link my couple recent wrap-ups down below for you guys so that if you want to hear more in depth of them, you can. I listened to Gerald's Game, which is about this woman who goes to like this cabin, like house by itself, you know, secluded, and they want to have some sexy fun times, and he handcuffs her to the bed and then he dies. And so it's kind of similar to Misery, where she's stuck in this house and she can't get out of these handcuffs and she's slowly dying. I gave this 3 stars. I found it kind of slow, but still suspenseful and good. I've listened to Dolores Claiborne, which I gave 3.5 stars. This book is about this woman named Dolores Claiborne, who is, the entire book is her telling the story to these detectives or policemen, like she's being investigated for this crime. It was really, really interesting. The audiobook for this was amazing. Definitely a good example of a complex female character in a Stephen King book. Those can be sometimes hard to come by. Most recently, I have read Needful Things. I talked about this in my last wrap up, so I'm really not going to get into it, but I gave this 4.5 stars, probably should have just been 5 stars. Really good. This guy Leland Gaunt opens up this creepy shop in this small town. In his shop he sells things that people have always wanted, and he just happens to have them, and they can buy it for really cheap, but they have to do a favor for him, and the favors are never good things, so he kind of just messes up this entire town, and it was really good. Another recent read of mine, Dr. Sleep. I really enjoyed this. This is a sequel to The Shining that follows Danny Torrance, the kid in The Shining, and kind of what he's up to, what he does for a living, and he gets kind of wrapped up with this group of people who also have a shining ability, and they have to solve this big conflict. And it was really good. I've heard a lot of mixed things. I know a lot of people aren't a big fan of this, but I'm so excited, and I'm very excited for the movie as well. I have read It by Stephen King. I gave that 2.5 stars. I think we all know what It is about, but that book could have been way shorter than it was. That's why I gave it 2.5. I love the basic plot. I think the movies do a really good job with this because they take only the exciting parts of this book and they put it on film. Also, the character of Beverly when she's like a 12-year-old girl, very cringy the way that she's described. I've also read The Mist, which I gave 3 stars, and this is about this family who wakes up one morning and this weird mist rolls in and doesn't leave, and it kind of becomes like a survival-y kind of thing, and there's weird monsters in the mist. And I gave this 3 stars just because I thought it started stronger than it ended, and the ending was just kind of a little meh for me. I also listened to A Good Marriage, which I gave 3 stars as well. Same thing, I think it started off stronger than it ended, but this is about a lady who, when her husband is away on a work trip, she finds this box that has like an ID card of this lady who has died, and she starts thinking that her husband is this serial killer, and then he comes home, and that's all I'm gonna say. Next, I also listened to The Girl Who Loved Tom Gordon, and I gave this 3 stars. This is about a girl who gets separated from her family on a hiking trip, and she survives a couple days, I think it's a couple days, a while, out in this forest by herself, so it's a good like survival story. She hallucinates her favorite baseball player, Tom Gordon. She hallucinates that he's there and he kind of helps motivate her, and there's a little like hint at maybe this like supernatural bear monster thing that's out there in the woods. And I gave it 3 stars just because it didn't like wow me, and the ending was kind of disappointing, but it was good. I think last December I read The Body by Stephen King, gave this 2.5 stars. It's like the shortest one of his that I've read, and it still managed to be slow paced. It's about this group of kids who go out and they find this dead body, and I know they made a movie out of it, and I think I like the movie better, but yeah, it was okay. And then I also read Pet Sematary, which I gave 5 stars. I think we all know what that's about too. It's about the cemetery where if you bury something in it, it'll come back. Yeah, if you want to know my more in-depth thoughts on, you know, the majority of these, again, I will link my wrap-ups down below. So I took way too long to figure this out, but I ranked mine from 1 to 13. So let's start with my least favorite. So number 13, The Body. Number 12, It. Number 11 is The Mist. Number 10 is The Girl Who Loved Tom Gordon. Number 9 is Gerald's Game. Number 8 is A Good Marriage. Number 7 is Dolores Claiborne. Number 6 is The Shining. Number 5 is Misery. Number 4 is Carrie. Number 3 is Dr. Sleep. Number 2 is Needful Things. And number 1 is Pet Sematary. So now I wanted to kind of classify these 13 into categories, because I know a lot of people want to read Stephen King, but they don't like scary things, and not all of his books that he's written are scary. There's a lot of his that I haven't read, obviously, so I can only speak to what I have, but A Good Marriage I would classify as a domestic thriller. Survival thrillers with like one main character would be The Girl Who Loved Tom Gordon, Gerald's Game, Misery, and The Mist. So again, not like horror, but just, you know, a suspenseful kind of, just a situation you would not want to be in yourself. Not scary, but with a spooky atmosphere / suspenseful. So Dolores Claiborne, The Body, Needful Things, and Dr. Sleep all have really good spooky atmospheres without being spooky themselves. And then in my opinion, for horror, I would classify It, The Shining, Carrie, and Pet Sematary as like the horror ones. The ones that you might want to stay away from if you don't want to read anything scary. So those are just my classifications on that. So like I said, if horror is not your thing, he does have other genres, but again, I don't think that you need to read Stephen King. You know, he's not everyone's cup of tea. Sure, he's like a very well-known author, but you shouldn't feel obligated to read him if it just doesn't interest you. So here is my theory about Stephen King books. I think, without fail, his books are better on audiobook than if you physically read them. Now, I have been kind of testing this out. 10 out of the 13 of these books I listened to on audiobook, and a lot of them I felt like I enjoyed it more and I rated it higher because I listened to it. Gerald's Game and Dolores Claiborne especially, I think would be very slow and monotonous and kind of boring to get through, but you'd be happy in the end because the plot was cool, but the pacing's just slow. And I do think Stephen King, in general, his books are very slow paced, but I also think for these ones, because they're fairly short, it's just the nature of the story, is you need it to be kind of slow. I think when you listen to something, the pacing doesn't become as like much of a thing that you notice, and so I do think I rated those higher because I listened to them. I am always intrigued by the plots of a lot of his books, but I feel like his execution isn't always the greatest, and so it's less of a commitment and more of like a passive thing to listen to an audiobook, and so I just think it takes less effort, and I think his plots are worth it in the end, but sometimes the journey getting there can be kind of slow and tedious, and I think audiobooks kind of take that away and just give you the good stuff, if that makes sense. I also think in terms of genres that I read frequently, I do think thrillers and just his kind of types of books that he writes are very good audiobooks in general. I feel like contemporary fiction or nonfiction or thrillers or things like that that aren't fantasy just are a lot easier to keep up plot-wise on audio. So let me know your thoughts on this. Let me know if you've read any of these. Most importantly, let me know if one of your favorite Stephen King books is not on this list. These are just the 13 that I kind of grew up hearing about and wanting to read, and as of last month, like, I've finished that list, so now it's time to kind of find a couple others of his that might be good, but I honestly don't know where to start. Like I said, I haven't really like searched for a new Stephen King title in years. So please let me know if you have any recommendations, as it still is spooky season. Like I said, I overall do really enjoy Stephen King. I think he is a good writer, but his style definitely isn't for everyone, and definitely some of his books are better than others. I think people can kind of put him on a pedestal just because he's such a well-known author, but you know, it's important that we recognize that sometimes the way he writes characters are problematic, the language he uses can be problematic, and his stories just aren't for everybody. But I do hope this helped some people if you wanted to kind of get into Stephen King but you're not sure where to start. I definitely obviously recommend like my top 5 of his, or go based on like the classification chart if you don't want to read something scary. I hope you guys enjoy this. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you next time. Bye!